What if one of the world's calmest seas is hiding the moment history broke? Beneath the Black Sea, archaeologists have found ancient shorelines and riverbeds where open water should never exist. These are not the marks of slow change. They point to something sudden, something that happened approximately 7,600 years ago. If this sea rose gradually, this evidence should not be here. And if people once lived on this land, they didn't have time to leave. So what happened beneath the Black Sea, and how much of human history vanished with it?
Before it became a sea, the Black Sea was something else entirely. During the last ice age, global sea levels were approximately 120 meters lower than they are today. Vast amounts of water were locked in glaciers, and coastlines around the world extended far beyond their modern limits. In this period, the Black Sea Basin was not connected to the Mediterranean. It functioned as an isolated freshwater lake fed by rivers like the Danube and the Dnieper. Its shoreline lay 150 meters below the present sea level. Geological reconstructions suggest that what is now open water was once a wide expanse of lowland, a landscape shaped by rivers, wetlands, and fertile plains. These conditions were not unusual. Similar environments supported early human movement across Europe and Western Asia during the same period, around 9,000 to 8,000 years ago. In other words, this was not an empty place. As temperatures rose and ice sheets began to melt, water levels increased worldwide. This process is well documented and, in most regions, occurred gradually over thousands of years. Coastlines shifted inland over centuries, giving ecosystems and human populations time to adapt. But the Black Sea does not show the signs of such a slow transformation. Instead of gentle transitions, researchers found evidence pointing to a sudden change, one that reshaped the entire basin in a relatively short span of time. The most striking indicator lies in the contrast between freshwater and saltwater deposits. In a gradual flood, these layers blend and mix. In the Black Sea, they do not. Sediment cores extracted from the seafloor show freshwater deposits ending abruptly within a layer just 2 to 3 centimeters thick, representing perhaps only a few years of accumulation, not centuries. Above them, saltwater layers appear almost immediately, marked by marine organisms that could not have survived in freshwater. This suggests that the basin did not slowly fill from rising rivers or rainfall. It was overwhelmed. The prevailing explanation, proposed by geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman in the late 1990s, centers on the Bosphorus Strait. As global sea levels rose, the Mediterranean Sea stood approximately 150 meters higher than the isolated freshwater lake. The natural barrier, a land bridge or narrow channel at the Bosphorus, held back this massive difference in water levels. Until it didn't. But the anomalies did not appear once, they appeared again and again. As surveys expanded, the same features surfaced across different sections of the basin: consistent depths, similar shoreline angles, and matching sediment breaks. Independent research teams, using different tools, began to report the same thing. The evidence suggested that the Black Sea was once significantly lower than it is today. Not just slightly, but dramatically. Large areas that are now underwater would have been exposed land, fed by rivers and surrounded by fertile plains. This was not a marginal difference, it was a different landscape altogether. What remained were geological fingerprints of a rapid transition, a change that happened faster than ecosystems could adapt and faster than human communities could respond. The traditional timeline no longer fit the evidence beneath the water. And once that realization took hold, archaeologists were forced to confront a difficult possibility. If the Black Sea did not change slowly, then whatever reshaped it arrived with speed and left behind a silence that still rests on the seafloor. Before it became a sea, the Black Sea was something else entirely. During the last ice age, global sea levels were approximately 120 meters lower than they are today. Vast amounts of water were locked in glaciers, and coastlines around the world extended far beyond their modern limits. In this period, the Black Sea basin was not connected to the Mediterranean. It functioned as an isolated freshwater lake fed by rivers like the Danube and the Dnieper. Its shoreline lay 150 meters below the present sea level. Geological reconstructions suggest that what is now open water was once a wide expanse of lowland, a landscape shaped by rivers, wetlands, and fertile plains. These conditions were not unusual. Similar environments supported early human movement across Europe and Western Asia during the same period, around 9,000 to 8,000 years ago. In other words, this was not an empty place. As temperatures rose and ice sheets began to melt, water levels increased worldwide. This process is well documented and, in most regions, occurred gradually over thousands of years. Coastlines shifted inland over centuries, giving ecosystems and human populations time to adapt. But the Black Sea does not show the signs of such a slow transformation. Instead of gentle transitions, researchers found evidence pointing to a sudden change, one that reshaped the entire basin in a relatively short span of time. The most striking indicator lies in the contrast between freshwater and saltwater deposits. In a gradual flood, these layers blend and mix. In the Black Sea, they do not. Sediment cores extracted from the seafloor show freshwater deposits ending abruptly within a layer just 2 to 3 centimeters thick, representing perhaps only a few years of accumulation, not centuries. Above them, saltwater layers appear almost immediately, marked by marine organisms that could not have survived in freshwater. This suggests that the basin did not slowly fill from rising rivers or rainfall. It was overwhelmed. The prevailing explanation, proposed by geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman in the late 1990s, centers on the Bosphorus Strait. As global sea levels rose, the Mediterranean Sea stood approximately 150 meters higher than the isolated freshwater lake. The natural barrier, a land bridge or narrow channel at the Bosphorus, held back this massive difference in water levels. Until it didn't. When that barrier failed, seawater began pouring through. Calculations suggest the flow may have reached 50 cubic kilometers of water per day, more than 200 times the volume of Niagara Falls. At that rate, the lake's water level could have risen by as much as 15 centimeters per day. Not as a trickle, as a surge. Such an inflow would have flooded vast areas of land within weeks or months. Rivers would have reversed direction. Shorelines would have disappeared almost overnight. Any communities living along the edges would have been forced to flee or be overtaken. What makes this scenario unsettling is not the scale of the water alone, but the speed implied by the evidence. Human societies can adapt to slow change. They migrate, rebuild, and adjust their way of life. But sudden environmental collapse leaves little room for preparation. If this land vanished quickly, it would explain why no clear trail of abandonment remains beneath the sea, no gradual retreat, no long period of transition. Just absence. When researchers began examining the floor of the Black Sea more closely, they were not searching for dramatic answers. They were looking for consistency, the kind of slow, layered record that inland seas usually preserve. That is not what they found. Using advanced sonar mapping, sediment cores, and underwater surveys conducted throughout the early 2000s, scientists expected to see gradual transitions, freshwater deposits blending into saltwater layers, shorelines softened by time, and river deltas slowly buried as water levels crept upward. Instead, the evidence showed interruption. Sediment cores revealed a sharp chemical and biological boundary between freshwater layers and overlying saltwater deposits.
Below the boundary, the soil reflected a stable, freshwater environment with specific types of mollusks and plant remains. Above it, unmistakable signs of marine conditions appeared, including saltwater mollusks that suddenly replaced their freshwater counterparts. This kind of break is difficult to explain through gradual change. Equally puzzling were the submerged river channels traced across the seabed. These channels did not fade out gently, as rivers usually do when water rises slowly. They ended suddenly, as if cut off mid-course. Their shape suggested sustained flow over exposed land, not erosion beneath moving water. Ancient shorelines told the same story. Rather than sloping gradually downward, many appeared sharply defined, forming clear edges at consistent depths around 150 meters below the modern surface. These were not random formations. They aligned across large areas of the basin, indicating a shared moment of transformation. In 2000, explorer Robert Ballard, famous for finding the Titanic, led expeditions to the Black Sea floor. His team discovered what appeared to be preserved ancient structures at depths of approximately 95 meters, including carved wooden beams and stone tools. While these findings remain controversial and debated among archaeologists, they suggested human activity in areas now deep underwater.
Individually, none of this evidence proves a single catastrophic flood. But together, it presents a problem. A slow rise in water should leave behind gradual change. A rapid inflow leaves contrast, and contrast is exactly what the Black Sea preserved. Critics argue that tectonic activity, underwater landslides, or uneven sedimentation patterns could create similar sharp boundaries without requiring rapid flooding. Some researchers also question whether the flow rates calculated by Ryan and Pittman are accurate, suggesting the process may have taken decades rather than months. The debate continues, with some researchers calling for more extensive deep-water surveys before conclusions can be drawn. But what cannot be disputed is this: the Black Sea transitioned from fresh water to salt water in a compressed time frame, one that occurred faster than similar transitions observed in other post-Ice Age bodies of water. When the data sets were placed side by side, the Black Sea stood apart. And once that possibility is acknowledged, another question becomes unavoidable. If the land disappeared quickly and the environment changed without warning, then the story of human movement in this region may not begin where history says it does, but where the water stopped recording it.
When environments change slowly, people leave traces. They abandon homes over time, tools accumulate in layers, settlements shift gradually from one place to another. Archaeology is built on these patterns, the quiet, predictable marks of adaptation. But sudden change leaves a different kind of record, or sometimes none at all. If large areas around the Black Sea were flooded rapidly, the human response would not have been organized retreat, it would have been flight. People would have moved quickly, taking only what they could carry, leaving behind structures, pathways, and objects that were never meant to be preserved. This is one reason sudden environmental collapse can look, centuries later, like emptiness. Communities living near water tend to build light, temporary shelters, fishing camps, seasonal dwellings. These leave subtle traces even under stable conditions. When water arrives without warning, those traces vanish almost instantly. What survives, instead, is behavior. After the suspected flood period around 7,600 years ago, archaeologists notice a shift in settlement patterns across surrounding regions. Human activity appears more frequently on higher ground. New communities form along elevated river valleys and plateaus in modern-day Turkey, Bulgaria, and Romania, often far from former coastlines. This is not unique to the Black Sea. It is a pattern seen repeatedly after sudden environmental stress. People move upward. They seek distance from water. They favor defensible, stable terrain. At the same time, there is evidence of interruption. Tool traditions change abruptly.
Materials that were once common disappear. Knowledge that required long-term stability, navigation routes, seasonal cycles, local geography becomes fragmented. This does not mean civilizations ended, it means they scattered. Survivors carry fragments of their past with them, techniques, stories, and memories. But without the original landscape, those fragments no longer fit together cleanly. Over generations, they become simplified, adapted, and reinterpreted. What remains is continuity without context. This helps explain why early post-flood societies in the region often appear more cautious, more localized, and less connected than what might be expected after long periods of development. It also explains why some forms of knowledge seem to vanish only to reappear much later in different forms. Some researchers have even proposed connections between this event and ancient flood narratives found in cultures across the Near East and Mediterranean, stories passed down through generations that speak of a time when water rose suddenly and the world changed. While such connections remain speculative and impossible to prove definitively, they raise an intriguing possibility that memories of real environmental catastrophes may have been woven into the mythologies we know today. From an archaeological perspective, this creates a paradox. The more sudden the collapse, the less visible it becomes. No long decline, no extended abandonment phase, just a sharp break, followed by silence. And that silence does not mean nothing happened. It means something happened too fast to leave a clear trail. If communities around the Black Sea were forced to adapt suddenly, their disappearance beneath the water would not be a mystery of absence, but a consequence of survival. They did not vanish, they moved, and wherever they went, they carried the imprint of a world that no longer existed.
Archaeology is built on what survives. Stone lasts, bones endure, sediment records time patiently. But water does not preserve history, it removes it. If large areas around the Black Sea were flooded rapidly, then the absence of evidence is not a failure of research, it is the expected outcome of sudden loss. Landscapes disappear, shorelines vanish, human activity is erased before it can settle into the layers archaeology depends on. This is why questions surrounding the Black Sea remain unresolved, not because the evidence is weak, but because it is incomplete by nature. Geology can tell us how land changed, sediments can tell us how water moved, but human stories require continuity, and continuity is exactly what sudden environmental collapse destroys. What remains are fragments, a shoreline without homes, riverbeds without settlements, migration patterns without clear origins. These gaps make researchers cautious, and rightly so. Archaeology does not move quickly. It resists dramatic conclusions, especially when the physical record is partial and the stakes are high. To claim certainty where uncertainty exists would weaken the discipline itself. Yet caution does not mean dismissal. The Black Sea evidence continues to pose the same challenge it did when it was first identified. It does not fit comfortably into a slow, uniform model of post-Ice Age change. It suggests interruption rather than transition, compression rather than continuity. And that matters. Because history is not only written by what survives, but also by what disappears. If water erased parts of the human story before they could be recorded, then early civilization may not begin where textbooks place it, but where the record resumes after a break. What appears to be a starting point may instead be a restart. This reframes how we interpret silence in the archaeological record. Silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes it means erasure.
The Black Sea stands as a reminder of this uncomfortable truth, not as proof of a single catastrophe, but as evidence that the past does not always unfold at a pace we can study. Some moments pass too quickly, reshaping the world before memory can anchor itself. And if this happened here,
It likely happened elsewhere, along coastlines now submerged, across plains now lost beneath water, in regions where the ground itself no longer remembers what once stood upon it. Somewhere beneath 150 meters of water, river valleys wind through darkness, villages that no one remembers, fields that no one can farm, stories that no one can tell. The Black Sea does not reveal its secrets willingly, but every survey, every core sample, every sonar image brings us closer to understanding what was lost and why, when history broke, it broke in silence, because the only witnesses never made it to higher ground.